probe into the alleged plot to assassinate Khalistani separatist Gurpatwant Singh Pannun kick-started. The FBI in the United States has charged a former Indian intelligence official. The suspect, codenamed as CC1 in court documents so far, is Vikas Yadav, a former official of the Research and Analysis Wing or RAW. Yadav, now on the FBI's wanted list, is charged with plotting the murder bid and money laundering. His co-conspirator and Indian businessman Nikhil Gupta has been extradited to the United States from Czech Republic in June this year. According to the indictment, the murder plot started in May 2023. Yadav allegedly conspired with Nikhil Gupta and used Amanat as an alias. He allegedly hired Gupta to carry out the assassination, who then approached a third person to hire a hitman. But this person was working with the US law enforcement. In June 2023, Nikhil Gupta hired a hitman and paid in advance for the murder. On June 18, Hardeep Singh Nijjar was killed in Canada, and Yadav allegedly sent the co-accused a video of the murder and asked him to kill Pannun immediately. Nikhil Gupta was arrested on June 30th by Czech officials on the request of the United States. And 3 months later, Vikas Yadav was arrested in Delhi but is now out on bail. The Indian government formed a probe panel to investigate the US allegations. The government on Thursday confirmed Vikas Yadav is no longer its employee.
The US State Department informing us that the individual who was named in the Justice Department indictment is no longer an employee of the government of India. Yes, I confirm that he's no longer an employee of the government of India.
The probe into the Kill Pannun plot is clearly ramping up, with India and the United States jointly investigating the charges. Bureau Report, India Today.
On one hand, the United States has put former RAW officer Vikas Yadav on its wanted list. On the other, it continues to shelter Gurpatwant Singh Pannun, who's been designated a terrorist by India. The US Justice Department report on the Pannun plot has drawn a link with the Nijjar killing in Canada, saying that this particular officer, Vikas Yadav, within an hour of the killing of Nijjar in Canada, had a video which could have only been sent by somebody who was directly involved in the Nijjar killing, suggesting that at least one RAW officer in the Indian security establishment had an understanding of what was happening in Canada with Nijjar's killing and potentially was linked to the killers. The question also is, why is US turning the heat on India at this moment, and what is India's likely response going to be?
June 18, 2023, mass gunmen shoot and kill Khalistan supporting separatist Hardeep Singh Nijjar in Surrey, Canada. The assassination that triggered diplomatic tensions between India and Canada. It's now led to a complete breakdown of ties. The Canadian Prime Minister, Justin Trudeau, has repeatedly accused India of being involved in Nijjar's killing, a charge rejected by New Delhi.
Well, how much do you know? Give us the evidence you have on this. And our response was, well, it's within your security agencies. You should be looking into how much they know. You should be engaging. It's, oh, no, tell us what you know. Show us the evidence. And at that point, it was primarily intelligence, not hard evidentiary proof. So we said, well, let's work together and look into your security services and maybe we can get that done. No.
Nijjar was also an associate of Khalistan separatist Gurpatwant Singh Pannun, living in New York City. The indictment of former RAW officer Vikas Yadav for allegedly orchestrating a failed plot to assassinate Pannun has added another twist to this tale. The indictment report says Yadav sent Nikhil Gupta, an Indian national accused of being recruited by Yadav, a video clip showing Nijjar's bloody body slumped in his vehicle hours after his assassination. Gupta replied he wished he had personally conducted the killing and asked Yadav for permission to go to the field. Yadav responded that secrecy is important and it's better that you do not get involved in action. Gupta forwarded the said video clip showing Nijjar's slumped body minutes after receiving it from Yadav. The indictment report says that Gupta then told a confidential source that Pannu will now be more careful in the wake of the Nijjar murder. About 2 days later, on the 20th of June 2023, Yadav sent Gupta a new article about Pannu. Yadav then messaged, "It's a priority now." Gurpatwant Singh Pannu, an India-designated terrorist, declared a $500,000 bounty on the head of India's now expelled High Commissioner to Canada and was earlier accused of carrying out terrorist attacks against Indian targets. After US shared investigation details with India, New Delhi ordered an investigation and informed the US that Yadav is no longer in the employment of Government of India and that a legal process is currently underway in India. Bureau Report, India Today.
Make no mistake, what has happened is quite unprecedented. The US Justice Department has accused an official from India's external intelligence agency, RAW, of being involved in a plot to kill an American national on US soil, a Khalistani terrorist. And now that gentleman on your screen, right, a CRPF battalion commander posted in New York with the RAW as a wanted criminal, wanted by the FBI. They've laid out videographic evidence, audio recordings, WhatsApp messages, which show a direct link between Vikas Yadav and those who were involved in the conspiracy to kill Pannun, one of whom ended up actually being a US official who was involved with US enforcement agencies, and that's how this entire plot came to light. Now, is this a one-off rogue officer who just went loose, trying to either seek glory or some personal vendetta, and therefore indulged in these activities? The Indian establishment obviously thinks there's adequate proof against him, which is why he was arrested and has now been discharged from government service, which has now been accepted by the Indian government. What are the lessons from this entire episode, and what is at play? Are the US and Canada acting in tandem? The US just appearing to be more mature and statesman-like on the surface, but behind the scenes really egging Canada on, or is that too simplistic a reading? What happens from here? To discuss all this and more, I'm joined on the broadcast by Abhijit Iyer Mitra, Senior Research Fellow at the Institute of Peace and Conflict Studies. Colonel Ajay Shukla is Consulting Editor, Strategic Affairs, military veteran. We have Yashovardhan Azad, former IPS officer, Special Director, Intelligence Bureau, and Sushant Sareen, Senior Fellow at the Observer Research Foundation. I want to go across to Abhijit Iyer Mitra first. Abhijit, I read the indictment put out by the US Justice Department. There are very specific audio recordings, WhatsApp messages, supposed videos which we can't see but are referred to in the indictment, which show that this RAW official was in contact with those involved in a plot to kill Pannun in New York. Now, is this just rank, amateur, ham-handed action of one junior level field operative who went loose and did crazy things and got caught? Or because America alleges that this is a larger conspiracy to try and target those who are antithetical to India, living abroad, and to eliminate them? What do you think is at play?
So Rahul, first of all, to answer your question, I have to ask you a counter question. Do you know this gentleman? His name is Kiran Patel.
Mm-hmm.
Do you know who he is?
Go on, tell us.
He stayed at the Srinagar Raj Bhavan, possibly the most guarded building in India, for 6 months, claiming he was a PMO special officer. And it turned out he was a nobody. He was a doctor from Gujarat and he was impersonating somebody from the PMO. So understand, this is a country where you can impersonate anybody and get away with anything. At one point of time, Prabhakaran and several senior IPKF leaders were in the custody of the IPKF. LTT leaders were in the custody of the IPKF. And all that happened was there was a call, PMO has said release him, and they were released. And the PMO had never ordered that call. So, in India, anybody can pretend to be anyone. Now, the question is, was he acting alone, or are the Americans right and it's part of the larger conspiracy? If this is part of a larger conspiracy, Rahul, I have seen absolutely no proof. There is proof that this gentleman is coordinating attacks in America, but there is absolutely no proof other than that of any connection to or orders from anywhere else. Remember, the very fact that this gentleman boasts that, oh, I got Nijjar, well, he didn't say I got Nijjar killed, but Nijjar and everything else. This is usually the braggadocio you see a lot in government in India. It isn't new. It's not just in government, by the way. It's across the board. I want to see, do I believe Vikas Yadav did something? Yes. Do I believe it's a larger government conspiracy? I haven't seen any proof, and I want to see that.
Okay. Yashovardhan Azad, you've been in the Intelligence Bureau. I have many contacts, friends in IB, many in RAW. RAW is usually a highly competent and professional agency, and their officials are very fine analysts. There's absolutely no doubt. This Vikas Yadav seems to have been like this gung-ho, I think I'm James Bond, but actually I'm not. He's calling people himself. If he's a RAW agent, which he was, calling would-be assassins himself from his own phone, leaving a digital footprint, talking about what's happening. He's getting a video of the Nijjar killing. He's forwarding it to his contact. I mean, this guy seems as amateur can be. I mean, how can this guy be a serious RAW official, and why was he even in New York for the research and analysis wing?
Well, yes, normally operations are not conducted like this, such a ham-handed manner. There's no doubt about it. But, why are we discussing this when government has already said that this man has been, relieved? And the point you're asking is that whether there is a larger, command or conspiracy behind it. I mean, Americans have no business to ask that even. There is, they have come to the level of Vikas Yadav, and Vikas Yadav has been relieved. The other thing which I want to point out is that Vikas is a fool because Vikas should have realized that if you hit any American terrorist anywhere, it becomes an issue of human rights, right? But if the Americans kill anyone they designate terrorist from Afghanistan to Syria, any poor country, then it's a terrorist killing. So this is the mistake which was made by this Vikas Yadav. Otherwise, tell me, Rahul, if there is an American terrorist Pannun, who's threatening the Indian Prime Minister, who's giving money $1 lakh to have a Khalistani flag on the Red Fort, NIA has prepared one of the finest dossiers I can tell you with some information. Finest dossier, and despite that, if it's a question of human rights, just because he's an American citizen, he's not been expatriated, no proceedings are being taken against him. So a junior level officer attempted this. I will not even say it is bad or good. I will say it has been done at that level. Government found out and they have relieved. That is my explanation for this.
Colonel Ajay Shukla, where do you come out on this? Because this is typically not how the RAW operates. It seems to be an aberration because you've got this one official who's left so much digital fingerprint that anybody who understands anything about spycraft will be shocked by how amateur this official is. Was he an official gone rogue, or do you think there's a larger conspiracy which needs to be examined carefully?
I think there is definitely a larger conspiracy. This is not one officer who has gone rogue and does not have support from either his organization or colleagues and former people who have worked with him. So the important point to remember here is that Khalistan and Khalistani forces and proponents have been around in Canada for a very long time. It is actually quite remarkable that you've had a country which has lost an airliner with hundreds of people on board, and which has these people who were part of that conspiracy coming and going from the mother country, that's India, and still walking free. As my sort of co-panelists have pointed out already, this is not something which is usually done or usually takes place. So we've got a large number of Indian diaspora members, including many Sikhs living in the US. We have many living in Canada, but it is Canada which is the source of terrorism flowing towards India. And it is the Canadian Sikh community is quite united in at least one respect, and that is the demand for Khalistan. So it's such a murky playing field, this whole thing. Somebody who was working for the US, and this brings back the Mumbai killings in a certain way. Working for the US as an agent of one of its secretive agencies, coming and turning out to be the agent of a very, very dangerous and damaging killing. So I think we have to see this in the larger sort of perspective. You have the Canadians, you have the US, you have India, and given the strength of the Five Eyes intelligence grouping, of which Canada, US, UK, Australia, and New Zealand are a part, India does not have too much of a chance of having those agencies on its side when the interests of one of those five agencies is at stake.
Sushant Sareen, typically raw officials undergo years of training, whether it's expertise on Pakistan, China, the United States, whatever is their area of specialization, they train very hard. There's a shortage of officers in the Cabinet Secretariat, and therefore you're now bringing in officers on deputation from forces like the CRPF, which could create questions around whether there is adequate indoctrination, training, techniques, because these are people who've been trained in CIOps, counterinsurgency, or fighting Naxals, and are suddenly sent on important sensitive international assignments, potentially applying techniques which they may have used successfully against Naxals, against international targets. Is that really what went wrong over here, or do you think this is just an aberration? We need to examine the larger conspiracy of why the US is making all of this public.
Rahul, you keep talking about the larger conspiracy. As far as I am concerned, the larger conspiracy which I want to unveil is why are the Americans and the Canadians so soft on these Khalistani separatists? Are they assets of the American and Canadian establishments? What is the reason why, despite constant representations by India, and as Mr. Azad has just listed out, very comprehensive dossiers being given to them, they don't act against these guys? And Justin Trudeau lied during his testimony yesterday when he says that whenever the Indians have given us something, we've always taken action. He should please tell us what action he has taken against a single one of these Khalistani terrorists. But to come back to your main question, assuming for the sake of argument that this was a planned operation and that somebody had instructed this gentleman, Mr. Yadav, to try and get hold of or eliminate India's enemies who are being protected by foreign governments. This is something the Americans do all the time. And for them to pretend that they have some kind of exceptionalism, that their rule of law and the safety of their citizens is more precious than the safety of India and Indian citizens, I'm sorry, I don't accept it. An American white man's life or a brown man or a American Sikh's life is not more precious than an Indian Sikh's life or an Indian's life. Okay? Let's be very clear about it. So they don't enjoy any exceptionalism on this, and certainly not the Canadians. But let us assume that, for the sake of argument, that this was an operation which was handed out to this guy. Look, operations go wrong.
No.
Right? Maybe it was bad tradecraft. Maybe the man fouled up. Maybe he was very gung-ho and he thought, this operation is like what maybe cops in India can do and get away with. Maybe that was the case. I don't know. I'm not privy to that. But operations sometimes go wrong. My question is, okay, fine. Maybe Indians stepped out of the line and did something. Why are the Americans doubling down on this the way they are doing? What are they trying to prove? I want to seriously ask this question, because you can't want to have a strategic relationship with India at one level and strategically undermine India at another level, which is precisely what they are trying to do. And for somebody to pretend that either the RCMP is, God's gift to Canada or to mankind, that each one of their investigations is so good, which we saw how they botched up the Kanishka Air investigations, or the American FBI, which has not been able to track down the people who have attacked the Indian consulates or who have attacked Hindus in Hindu temples in Canada, they in the United States, they have not been able to track these guys down or crack down on people who have threatened Indian airlines.
Okay, let me put those questions to Michael Kugelman, because the question of American hypocrisy is front and center. America does this all the time against its enemies all across the world, whether it's in Pakistan, Afghanistan, elsewhere. They go and target their enemies, and it's totally kosher for Washington to do so. When a country which is supposed to be a strategic ally is allegedly doing the same, they're doubling down in this fashion, leading to many to wonder in India, A, can you trust the United States as a true strategic ally? Are they truly on your side? And B, why are they so soft on Khalistani terrorists? I mean, this man is threatening to kill the Indian Prime Minister. This is not freedom of speech. This guy is a Khalistani terrorist. He is threatening the Indian state. He's threatening the Indian people. And DC seems surprisingly soft on him. And your other friend, Israel, is conducting all kinds of operations. America pretends to be upset, yet chooses to look the other way.
Yeah, thanks, Rahul. So I absolutely accept and acknowledge the allegation of selectivity and hypocrisy. I mean, if you look at examples of Soleimani or even bin Laden, for that matter, indeed, the U.S. carries out these activities. But look, I mean, to be very candid, I think that the way this is seen in the U.S., Khalistanis in the United States are not breaking U.S. laws. They're not threatening the U.S. or its interests. Their activities and what they say are generally protected by U.S. law. And indeed, there have been some cases, for sure, in the U.S. When Indian consulates have been targeted by these individuals. We all know that. And I recall that U.S. officials have very strongly condemned those incidents when they happen. This was, from a U.S. perspective, this alleged attempted assassination of Pannun. It's a serious breach of law, a violation of sovereignty, and the U.S. takes these things very seriously, as any country would. Wouldn't India react the same way if the U.S. or Canada tried to carry out a murder for hire on Indian soil? Would India not react in a particular way? So yeah, I think that unfortunately these things happen, and it's particularly unfortunate in this particular case, if these allegations are true, that a strategic partner of the United States is carrying out a murder for hire activity. But my final point is that I actually think the Biden administration has been very careful and quite responsible in terms of how it has responded to these very serious allegations, particularly if you compared to the Canada case, right? The U.S. has not really done, the government has not really said much publicly about the allegations. It's allowed the process to play out. The indictments have been released. That lays out a lot of detailed evidence. And I think that the U.S. is very keen to ensure that it doesn't let this issue torpedo its relationship with India, which the administration certainly considers to be very important.
So Shan Sareen wants to come in and respond to A, would India be okay if the U.S. carried out hits against people living in India but acting against American interests? And B, he says these Khalistanis, even though India thinks of them as terrorists, aren't seen as terrorists by America because they haven't really conducted any violence against American interests. And therefore, while they may be irritants, it's not seen as if they should be thought of as terrorists. Sushant.
Okay, Rahul, on the first one, if India valued the relationship with the United States and the United States was to carry out such an action in India, India would not make a song and dance about it publicly. Even we have a justice system, even we have our own independent, quote-unquote, legal system, and anybody who wants to tell me that the Justice Department in the United States is completely independent of the executive branch, okay, fine. I'm maybe they are smoking something which they should not be smoking. But the fact of the matter remains, India would probably raise this issue, raise it quietly, silently, and try and sort it out. The way we did it with Iran when we caught one of their agents trying to bomb an Israeli embassy. We did it kind of quietly. We didn't make much of a song and dance about it. On the second issue, my question to Michael is, Michael, if supposing you claim that the Khalistanis have not broken any law. Supposing, Michael, you were to today make a video and say that no American or no Indian should fly in Air India because their life would be in danger, very clearly alluding to a possibility of bombing an aircraft, what would happen to you? Number one. Number two, if you were to stand up and say that, well, I'm announcing a bounty on an American diplomat and that, calling for the assassination of American diplomats, painting a target on their back, please tell me what is the action which will be taken against you? Will that fall under the rubric of freedom of speech and expression, or will you crack down on that? And I can give you many instances where people have even said something online, even though they are probably college students or school students or whatever, and they've been put in the clanger. And you're telling me that Pannu is completely above board, he's not an agent of the United States, that nobody has acted against him?
Let Michael Kugelman respond.
Yeah, no, I'm not trying to defend this guy. He clearly has very odious views, and I would be perfectly happy to see him put behind bars for a reason. But I'm trying to explain to you, answer the question that Rahul had answered earlier as to why the U.S. doesn't do more to crack down against these individuals. And I was laying it out that he has not violated a U.S. law. I'm not trying to justify the things he says, the threats that he's made. Absolutely not. And my other to the first part of what you said, Sushan, I would actually argue that the U.S. has indeed done things exactly the way you had said you would want India to do things if India were targeted by something like this. The U.S., particularly compared to Canada, the U.S. government has really been fairly quiet. It's talked a lot to its Indian interlocutors privately. It has not been leveling public allegations in a big way. You don't have senior U.S. officials talking about this very much at all, quite frankly. Letting the DOJ take care of its job, letting the indictments speak for what's happening. And U.S. officials respond. They respond to inquiries from the press, press that type of thing. But I would argue that the way that the U.S. has handled it has actually been very
Yashowardhan Azad wants to come in and respond on the question of American hypocrisy and whether America is acting as a true friend. Roman, a few days from now, there is the BRICS summit. The Prime Minister will be meeting Vladimir Putin, maybe meeting Xi Jinping. America trying to draw India away from those countries. But if this is how your good friends act, can Washington even be trusted, Yashowardhan Azad?
Michael, I have a very simple question. If there is an American who's become an Indian, and he is threatening your president every day, he's instigating the Americans over there to have some, anti-American flag. He's spouting venom, racial hatred. Won't you ask for his repatriation? Don't we have a repatriation treaty? Now, NIA, which does anti-terrorist actions all over the world now, has given a proper dossier with proper evidence to the American authorities. I agree with you, the Americans have been much more mature than the Canadians on this matter because we have strategic relationship. I understand that. But a simple thing, wouldn't this man be repatriated? Shouldn't he be repatriated? Because our justice system will take care of that, of the threats he's giving to the Indian Prime Minister, and he's trying to work it out by giving money. And on 26th January, when there was some agitation in Delhi, there was actually, at his behest, there was a flag which was posted, Khalistani flag, out here on the Red Fort. So my question is, why not repatriate him?
Mr. Kugelman?
As I had said before, I'm not a legal expert. It's not my place to weigh in on this. But again, as I had said before, I know I'm repeating this, but again, the U.S. government perspective is that he has not violated any U.S. laws, and that indeed India is a strategic partner, and that indeed the U.S. recognizes that what this guy has said about India, threats toward India, very concerning. But in terms of whether that lends itself to some type of repatriation agreement, I don't see how that would flow from that. But again, I'm not the legal expert, so you'd want to ask a seasoned lawyer that question.
I want to go across to Abhijit Iyer. What are the lessons from this entire episode? How do we ensure that India doesn't get caught in a situation like this. If there is an operation that is to be executed, it must be executed with a high level of finesse. I mean, look at what the Mossad is pulling off, one after another, stunning operations of breathtaking audacity. And in this case, in particular, we've left just so much evidence that anybody who's even not a spy or a sleuth will look at this and say, hey, come on, you have to be more mature and smarter than that.
Yeah. Look, the first rule of the game is don't get caught, Rahul.
Sure.
And, the thing is, I don't accept it was we who did it. I accept it was Vikas Yadav who tried some stunt. But that said, the failures aren't with Vikas Yadav. This is a personal failure. There's nothing linking him to the government. My issue is really with the way we've dealt with Gurpatwant Singh Pannun. Even the dossier we sent on him to Interpol for a red corner notice got rejected for insufficient information. I actually think that Gurpatwant Singh Pannu is probably a raw agent himself. I certainly think he's a great patriot because anybody who watches his videos on Twitter gets de-radicalized immediately. Anybody who says Khalistan just needs to watch his video and he'll say Hindustan, Hindustan from every single turret, mosque or minaret around. But humor aside, we need to also separate. In India, we understand that law and order is a state subject and other things are central subjects. Here, this is this Merrick Garland guy who's the state attorney making the case. The FBI is completely different. But when we talk about Israel, understand, Israel engages with the FBI. Israel engages with the CIA. They have their moles planted in there. America was bugging Angela Merkel's office. They were bugging Lula's office, the Brazilian president's office, the German chancellor's office. The Israelis do the same with the Americans. They keep tabs on these investigations. They preempt them and things like that. If you can't do that, then why are you getting into this situation? Third, finally, and I think this is very important, America applies the Brandenburg principle to incitement, which is a specific threat against a specific person or a group, right? Now, it works in a first world policing situation, though I would suggest that, Chicago and several other countries make downtown Burundi or Burkina, Ouagadougou or some African capital look first world by comparison, but leave Chicago aside, or Palo Alto aside for that matter, which is actually more like Dharavi these days. But focus for a minute on the Brandenburg principle. It's very specific threat against a specific person or group. The Hindu girl who threatened the community center over Palestine, she made a specific threat against them. Gurpatwant is very clever. He avoids either the specificity of the threat or he avoids the specificity of the target. He actually words his threats very, very carefully. So we need to understand that there is a legal distinction out there. Second, remember, in America, you can have these very high standards. In India, we don't have that standard of policing. We don't have that standard of judiciary who's able to, dissect. We are, after all, a third world country with third world institutions. We have to have much higher standards actually much lower standards of what constitutes incitement, because anything can start off a riot out here. We don't have the investigative ability. We don't have the preventive ability. So what you're looking at is a clash of two differential standards out here.
Okay.
Which is, it's a more fundamental issue. It's a systemic
Colonel Shukla, what are the lessons from this episode? Maybe if there are officials from forces like the CRPF who have to be deployed for such missions, we should send them on a year-long or longer training to the Mossad. I mean, let them go learn some real skills and then come back and apply them rather than try and act like a Desi James Bond and then end up with egg on their face.
Well, I think that the first thing that we need to remember, not just as a country and as a political entity, but also as an intelligence entity, is that when you target a citizen from another country, especially advanced Western democracies, the nature of their politics and the tradition of their politics demands that they take retaliation, or that they at least investigate and find out how one of their citizens was killed. we seem to have, or whoever has done this particular operation seems to have operated on the assumption that there is going to be no rigorous investigation or no sort of repercussions for what have happened. Now, that is something that we, I would not advocate going to the Mossad for training and so on, because there's just a completely different paradigm that they follow and we follow. But certainly we need to be more rigorous in our investigation and intelligence tradecraft so that we don't get stuck in these embarrassing situations.
Okay, I'd leave it there. I think we've covered a lot of ground. You've heard different kinds of perspectives. The good thing is, in a historical arc, this has not been India's track record. There haven't been multiple such attempts, and therefore, if there is an aberration, I think Vikas Yadav has already been relieved of government service, and that's something that's already been confirmed. He was arrested by the Delhi police. That again has been confirmed. So this is to be looked at as an aberration. Hopefully, it will never happen again. And whoever we sent has the requisite skills to be able to execute operations with finesse without leaving such a clear digital footprint, which really leaves no one with anything to say. There's no defense left in the manner in which this official carried out his duties. Terribly unfortunate, this, and hopefully it won't happen again. We're slipping into a break. Coming up on the other side, Israel Defense Forces capture the last moments of Hamas chief Yahya Sinwar. Benjamin Netanyahu says the war is not over. Details coming up on the other side.
Rangila Re with Motorola's incredible range of smartphones.
Hello, Moto.